did you start to notice changes in Liam and Noel?
No. The changes that came, I guess they were partly to do with the success, but they weren't because of the success. That's an interesting distinction to make here. It wasn't like, we're famous, let's be a dick, let's behave famously. What it was that in the early stages, as I say, if you're playing to 6 people in Salt Lake City, and in the early days, we were sharing rooms, right? So in those very early days, 94, beginning of 95, including the band, there were 10 people in the touring party. So the band of 5, there were 5 of us outside of the band. We shared rooms, right? We shared bedrooms. There was no money, and there was no outward sign that the band was successful. So it was just graft. It was just hard work. We were running. There was a show most nights. There was very little time in between legs of the tour, and this brings me back to, this was a band that knew how to work and that were prepared to do the work. Did they press the fun button? Yeah, absolutely. But what did change was a realization slowly that probably the predictions were going to be on point, that the level of success that they envisaged had every likelihood of actually manifesting itself. And then what happened was, and really the only issues that we ever had behaviorally were the tiffs initially between Liam and Noel. And initially it was sibling. It was sibling rivalry. It was the same stuff that Peggy would have been dealing with as they grew up. The same petty arguments about something and about nothing. The first argument I saw that Liam and Noel really got excited about was whether or not John Lennon would still be valid were he alive in 1994. Which is a conversation, but it's not a screaming match, no. Right? But it became a screaming match. So that was my introduction to that. But it was finished, and it was done, and it was in the rearview mirror pretty much as quickly as it began. And it was that kind of brotherly stuff, and then something else shiny came along and drew their attention, and it was done. Yeah. It was when there was a sense that Oasis meant something, perhaps even were transcending that line that we all understand as regarding what a rock and roll band is: noisy, long-haired ne'er-do-wells that stay out late and take drugs, and but that something more lasting was in the air. Then actually the disagreements between Liam and Noel became much more of a power struggle, because initially there was really nothing to struggle over, and it was really very straightforward. Noel ran the ship. It was only when there was a sense that the ship might actually be going somewhere that and this happens a lot in life, I think. Yeah. Until there's something to argue over, nobody argues.
Something to lose.
Something to lose. Absolutely, yeah, exactly. Something to lose, and then of course there's a sense of which direction should we be going, and I think that there's a real kind of there's a dark and there's a light, isn't there? With any great rock and roll band, with the Stones, with the Who, and certainly with Oasis, and one could argue that Liam brought the darkness, and yet without that darkness, well, you're a pop group. So Liam brought a huge amount to who the band were, frankly, to who the band are when they go out and do it all again next week, next month, whenever it is.
There was that moment you've spoken of when Noel first did an acoustic set.
Yeah, well, and that was the beginning of it. So the beginning, I mean, the band are coming back together again. Great. But if we look at the life of the band as being that first iteration, the initial moment where the end was written in the stars was in 1994, as early as 1994 at the Glasgow Barrowlands, and that was when we'd stayed up late. 2 or 3 days, nights, and then we flew up to Glasgow to do the show. If you're a drummer, then your equipment is packed in a box, skins are tightened. You know, if you're a guitar player, it's tuned, strings are changed, it's cleaned. If you're the singer, you are the instrument. And 3 days of non-stop Charlie is not kind to anybody's larynx, even a 20-something-year-old who, frankly, we all believed could bounce because he always had. And for the first time in Glasgow, he showed us that actually there is a line, and we believed he had reached it.
91% watching Heretics clips are not subscribed. Quick favour, hit subscribe. Free, takes 2 seconds, and helps us question everything together.